My wife thought I was cheating, so she cheated on me. It's not just a misunderstanding, but a betrayal. How do I face this marriage? Welcome to the Butterfly Tumblr Radio channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. My wife thought I was cheating, so she cheated. I took everything and humiliated her. I, 30 male, met my wife, a 28-year-old female, in college. My major was business economics. Hers was English. We met at the home of a mutual acquaintance. We hit it off very well, dated for a few years, and I proposed to her shortly after graduation, to which she immediately said yes. That's the condensed version of our romance, because I don't think there's anything particularly interesting in there. We have been married for 4 years now. I believe I began to detect some changes in my wife. By the way, she goes by the alias Isabella. I thinking about a year after we married. It began when she walked in on me and a female colleague at a bar. I know it sounds horrible, but it was a completely harmless circumstance. A group of co-workers went out for drinks after work, which is not unusual, and as everybody left one by one, it was soon only me and my colleague at the bar. Isabella entered with her buddies and came to say hello to us. I returned the greeting normally, because I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong. But when Isabella returned home after me, everything fell apart. When she walked in, she tossed her purse down and stomped towards me. She pointed a finger at me and screamed and how she discovered me cheating on her. I attempted to explain that it was not the case, but she wouldn't let me say anything. When she finally calmed down after calling me every nasty name a person can call a cheater, I described the scenario to her, even showing her images shared by the group earlier that night. I also explained to her that I didn't react suspiciously when she arrived with her friends, because I knew I wasn't doing anything illegal and hoped it would be obvious. After I explained, she said okay, as if she had finally understood. She stood there for a few seconds as if she wanted to say something before entering the room. This happened a long time ago, but the fact that she never apologized bothers me to this day. After all that, however, I'm retelling the entire story, because that's when she appeared to become possessive and unnecessarily jealous. I could detect mood fluctuations if I gazed in the direction of a lady or merely answered a few questions for her, even if she was only asking for directions. I also saw that these regulations didn't appear to apply to women, who were clearly not a threat. I believe that a reasonable level of jealousy is beneficial, since it allows for the enforcement of boundaries, but it is quite clear when it is excessive. In her instance, it simply seemed to get excessive, and for that instance, which I didn't understand because she had no reason to be suspicious of me in the presence of other ladies. Most of the time I know when an interaction with a woman has soured her, because I detect a difference in her feelings, but she only initiates something occasionally. It's never a peaceful discussion, because she gets emotional about the subject, and to say she drives me insane is an understatement, because she'll always use the smallest detail as the reason she suspects me. For example, she once caught me talking in the hallway with one of our apartment building's female neighbors. We were literally just discussing fundamental politics. Isabella walked out of our apartment, noticed us in the corridor, and came back in as soon as I saw that I knew I was in for a ride. At that point, I'll admit that I considered divorce, since I realized I couldn't continue living that way. It was quite taxing. The only problem was that I felt it would be preferable for us to try couples therapy first, at least before I ended things with her. After all, I love her, so we tried it. To be honest, it was beneficial in the short term. However, things took a comic turn when she felt the therapist was taking my side too frequently. Isabella then concluded that the therapist was trying to sleep with me. I recall laughing out loud the day she stated that opinion. It didn't improve the situation, but I couldn't stop myself. We eventually moved to a male therapist, and the sessions were able to last considerably longer, at least until the modifications appeared to be sticking in her skull. We had been without an incident for several months, so it appeared that we were making progress, at least to the point where I'm writing this post. The previous several months have been normal, like how things were between us before extreme jealousy existed. However, I believe things exploded when Rebecca, the same colleague who was in the bar with me years ago, came to the house to hand over some documents, and when I wasn't there because I was supposed to be working from home the next week. I believe my wife recognized her from the first time, and I'm not sure if she had a Winter Soldier moment or if it was simply because a woman came straight to the house looking for me. However, when I returned home, all hell broke loose. She began howling at me the moment I went through the door, and I was met with paperwork thrown in my face. She questioned why Rebecca knew where I lived. Before I could respond, she explained that I must have taken her there to sleep with her. The genuine response was that I had told her where I lived when she asked to drop off the documents. It didn't help that Rebecca is pretty curvaceous, so it turned into a diatribe about how I must like women who are in doubt far more than she does, and how I must have been sleeping with them all over town. She also stated that she was planning to have herself tested for STS. Since she was convinced that I had cheated on her several times when she was finished ranting, I strolled into the home, grabbed a few necessities and left. I really had nothing to say to her, especially in that state. I also knew that no matter what I said, the voice of reason would not reach her. I knew it would be best for me to leave the house completely, so I did. She was roaring with joy behind me, Rebecca's bed. Now this happened fairly recently and I've been sleeping at a motel. Since the truth is, I'm determined to divorce her, since I can't possibly live several more decades. Best case scenario, dealing with a woman who believes I am cheating on every other woman in existence. The trouble is that I know the therapy sessions help to some extent, and I'm torn between trying to attend more sessions with her and giving up. I believe this is the decision I need to assist with, so I'd appreciate it if you could all share your comments and thoughts on the subject. Edit. I've seen some comments claiming that I've tried enough and should just end our relationship. I sort of agree, because I'm afraid that no matter how many therapy sessions we have together, it will just take one trigger for her to revert to being an overly jealous woman. I may not divorce her straight soon, but I've never been more open to the possibility, and I believe that the next time this happens, I'm done, to be really honest. This is not an acceptable way to live, and I'm tired of living my life under such tight supervision. I don't want to live with regrets, so I'm going to give her one more chance and then I'll be done. If this only happens once more. I'm not optimistic, so I'm getting used to the prospect of being single again. It's what it is. The joys of matrimony, where I do frequently, develops into you did what faster than you can say in sickness and health sparks, fly dates are set, a proposal is made and boom. The wedding bells rang. Fast forward a little bit, and you're cast in a real-life scenario in which Isabella believes you're the Casanova of co-workers. She catches you enjoying a perfectly harmless drink with a female colleague. The next thing you know, you're being accused of cheating, and Isabella's new hobby is policing your interactions with women. If you so much as peek at a female, she's prepared to begin World War II. You do what any rational individual would do: pack your essentials and run to the closest motel. Now you're thinking about divorce, since living with the constant fear of a jealousy-fueled meltdown isn't exactly the dream life you signed up for. Life is too brief to be under continual suspicion. If Isabella can't trust you, perhaps it's time to end this drama and start over. Just make sure to examine any potential mates for jealousy tendencies on the first date update. Well, here's an unexpected update, and I don't know how to explain how irritated I am by this new development. So, as I mentioned in my previous piece, I was becoming more comfortable with the thought of divorce, but I wanted to give her one more chance. The good news is that I didn't have to wait long to see she was never going to improve, and she chose to demonstrate this in the most blatant way possible. I thought there was an issue when we went to a friend's cookout and I noticed her being especially touchy with someone there. We didn't know the guy, but when I questioned the host, who is a dear friend, he told me he was recently divorced and works in construction. I was concerned because my wife was never this touchy with anyone except me, so it seemed unusual to me. This was roughly 2 weeks after the final experience I described in the previous piece. Anyway, I did my best to keep an eye on her during the barbecue and avoided making a disturbance, so I only told her about it when we got home. She didn't apologize for it, and I'll never forget it. She answered, "Well, you know how I felt then." Honestly, that section left me stunned for a moment because she was basically confessing that she was rubbing up on the guy on purpose to make me jealous. To be honest, it seemed ridiculous to me because there was no reasonable comparison. She becomes envious when other women talk to me. I've never thrown myself at them or gone too close. It was not the same thing. She even said, "Are you just jealous because he's a handsome guy, because fitter than you?" At that moment I just went out because I was becoming angry and wanted to strike anything. She said nothing. As I turned and went, and I knew right away that I was going to contact a divorce lawyer. I did not return to the residence until 3 days later. The odd thing is, even if I hadn't been convinced enough, she made the decision. Just a day later, I received a call from a friend who had hosted the barbecue. His name is Bill, and he appeared to be rather serious. He suggested did we meet, and he agreed. When I approached him, he told me that his friend, the one my wife was chatting to and I had inquired about, had called him. According to him, the guy told him that he had hooked up with Isabella the day before, which was literally the day after I left the house, and he wanted to know what Bill thought of her, because she stated that she was unmarried. I must have spaced out at that moment, because I don't recall what happened after that. So I connected. It appeared that they had intercourse and Isabella presented herself as single to this man. The worst part is that I might not have discovered this if the other guy hadn't come to talk to Bill about it. My mind was racing at that point and I had no idea what to think. I had no idea how to proceed in the moment. Bill could tell I wasn't paying attention, so we waited for me to come back. He said he told the guy she was married and he looked astonished. Apparently she had made no indication that she was married and he informed Bill. "Forget," I asked. "I'll forget about her." He immediately finished telling me everything. I went home immediately to face her. I hadn't rehearsed anything, and when I saw her, I was ready to let my sheer rage guide me, because, honestly, is there anything rehearsed that can effectively describe how to deal with someone who cheats on you? When I stepped back into the home, I wouldn't say she was in a good mood, but she was more conversational than she usually is. After something like that, she still had an obvious attitude. As she said, "I didn't expect to see you back already," with a silly grin on her face. She was obviously attempting to rile me up, and it worked, because the first thing I said after that was "shut up." I've never been more brusque. She was taken surprised by that he slept with the person from the cookout. Don't think of denying it. "You cheated on me, Isabella." She remained there for a few seconds before meekly responding, "I now you understand how it feels." It came out nearly as a whisper, so I'm sure she recognized how foolish it sounded. I wasn't proud of it, but I threw one of our porcelain kitchen ornaments at her feet. That foolish comment irritated me, because I've never even considered cheating on her, so for her to say this as my revenge, and her response was insane to me. I can't remember what I said after that, but I do recall swearing, screaming and explaining. I remember telling her that she was insane. If she thought this made any sense. I informed her that she had never caught me even close to cheating, that she was continuously overreacting to the most minor contacts I'd had with women, and that she was deluded if she thought I had ever displayed the least evidence of unfaithfulness. I pointed out to her right there that all of the things that had triggered her had always been women's basic actions toward me, not them. I told her that, despite the tens of times she accused me of cheating, she never had concrete proof of any of them. It was all in her head, so I told her she needed help. I believe that was the point at which I expressed all I had ever wanted to scream at her, and after I finished she said nothing. She just stood there. I inquired if she had anything to say, and she replied nothing. She only shook her head slightly. I instructed her to pack a few belongings and depart again. She waited there for a moment before stepping into the bedroom. She emerged about an hour later with her suitcase packed, and I haven't seen her since. I don't need any help figuring out what to do next this time, because I've already contacted a divorce lawyer and I really want to make sure that I don't hurt her during the divorce, because I put up with this way too effing much over the years and I'm so exhausted and annoyed that this is what it came to. I'll get back to everyone once the divorce is finalized, and I know where I stand. So you were growing comfortable with the prospect of divorce, believing you'd give her one more chance to improve. She certainly didn't keep you waiting. At a friend's barbecue, you spotted her getting touchy with a strange guy. It turns out that this guy is recently divorced and works in construction, since nothing suggests happy marriage like your wife rubbing up against a stranger. Classic. Isabella, you let out all you had been holding back for so long, every unfounded charge, every jealous outburst. And how do you respond? Silence, just a blank expression and a small headshake. You tell her to gather your belongings and depart. Yes, she does, and you have not seen her since. So you finally called a divorce lawyer. No more therapy, no more second chances. This time you're ensuring that the divorce proceedings receive a much-needed reality check update too. I'm overjoyed to be writing this update right now, and I feel like I've had a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. Honestly, I'm feeling wonderful. So I posted an article about my highly jealous wife, who always felt I was cheating on her or interested in other women, and then she decided to make me jealous and sleep with the same person. That was the final straw for me, and I immediately contacted a divorce lawyer. It didn't take long for the papers to be ready, and I ensured she was served at her office. Just so. You know she works for a publishing company, so I'm sure I've supplied some workplace gossip there. In fact, I know I did, because she texted me that evening enraged about how I had embarrassed her and how she knew I was being vindictive. Anyway, let's skip ahead to the period where the divorce processes were underway. I made a terrible mistake because I had no evidence that she cheated on me. I didn't have a recording of my chat with my friend Bill or the affair partner's confession to him. I tried to see if Bill could persuade the affair partner to admit it, but that was impractical. However, it appeared like I was able to persuade them when I discussed her jealousy. When I honestly described the entire situation, I mentioned that we had been to couples therapy. She tried to repeat the same story in a way that appealed to her from the start, but it was simple to see through. Fortunately, at the conclusion of the day, I received a really positive outcome. I got to keep the house, which was fair, as I lived there before she moved in with me. It was ruled that there was no need to pay alimony, despite the fact that I made more than her because the difference was insufficient and the judge did not want to read word her behavior. We hadn't had any kids yet, which was terrific. I was relieved. There was nothing binding me to her. I also believe I got off light because I agreed to let her keep numerous items of furniture and appliances in the house. I mostly did this because I didn't want to leave many of the things she had chosen behind. I didn't need daily reminders about her. So that's it. I am free of her, and as much as it aches to having spent so many years of my life being labeled a cheater and then being cheated on, I'm glad to be in a situation where I know that won't happen again. Isabella was served at her publishing company. Oh, the wonderful, beautiful irony. I'm sure her colleagues were flipping through their gossip novels a little faster that day. Her angry text about being ashamed was simply the cherry on top. Nothing like some public humiliation to balance the scales of her neurotic behavior. In the end, you got to keep the house that you legally owned for free. Isabella avoided alimony and didn't have any children to complicate matters. So letting her take the furnishings and appliances was a genius move. Who needs to see reminders of her questionable taste in countless allegations cluttering up your new beginning? So here you are. I'm finally free. There will be no more daily accusations, hypervigilance over trivial discussions or rage tantrums with ceramic ornaments. You have emerged from the debris of that relationship bruised but not defeated, and eager to enjoy life without Isabella's jealousy-fueled turmoil. Here's to never hearing another hysterical diatribe about imaginary affairs and to a future haunted only by joyful memories. Cheers up. Here is the next story. We met at work by chance. She was the owner's eldest daughter and without a doubt his favorite little princess. She was 22 years old, with a recently obtained, albeit somewhat useless, university degree, and stood 5'6". Sophia was the personification of many men's fantasies, with her amazing physique and a grin that could melt an iceberg. Her beautiful flowing golden hair and piercing blue eyes were just mesmerizing one day. I was already in the lift returning from lunch when she ran into the foyer to get it. She appeared to be in a hurry, possibly going to meet her father. As she stepped in, she stumbled in her high heels and collapsed, clashing with me and landing on the floor. I swiftly sprang up and assisted her to her feet. Then I helped retrieve the strewn contents of her seemingly bottomless handbag. It was amazing how much she could stuff in it and yet carry it around. I'd noticed her before. Like many others, I was one of the captivated admirers who knew she barely noticed us as she passed past. I knew the floor she required and clicked the button as the lift dropped. I proceeded to assist her as I handed her the last thing from her handbag. The elevator doors opened. Our gazes met and I grinned. She tilted her head, looked at my name, badge and murmured gently, "Brian Nelson." That was me. What a sweet name. I like it, she remarked, turning to leave the lift. She turned back to me just as the doors closed, leaving me standing there still smiling and completely enamored. When the lift returned to my floor, I went back to my workplace. My mind was still confused by the experience, making it difficult to concentrate on the complexities of the accounting software program that our company was investigating. The next day was payday, and I was preparing to leave for lunch with some friends. When she appeared at my desk, she mentioned that we needed to rush to get to our lunch reservation. Stunned, I looked around and noticed everyone watching at us, perplexed as how I had managed to arrange a lunch date with the princess. Things moved swiftly after that. Within days, I was brought to the owner's office and strongly cautioned about the implications of hurting his daughter. My job was on the line since she appeared to like me. I had worked hard for 4 years to acquire my degree and find a job I enjoyed, and I didn't want to lose it. As it turned out, we truly clicked and got along famously, even though it cost me a fortune to keep up with her lavish habits. It wasn't that my compensation was low. She preferred more pricey settings. I kept reminding myself that upsetting her would most certainly lose me my job, so I catered to her every whim and demand. She told her parents she would remain a virgin until marriage, and she kept her promise. It was irritating for me, but at least I knew no one else was in the same situation. Almost 6 months after our first meeting, as we were leaving a lunch date, she stopped in front of a high-end jewelry store display to look at dress rings. I had recently paid off my credit card debt and felt problems. Fortunately, with my recent rapid advancements and labor, I was now earning enough to outperform. We're on spending spree. Sophia found a cause to go inside just to look, and I ended up accompanying her as she put on several items of jewelry. Before long she was drawn to engagement rings within minutes. I knew her ring size and the ring she loved. Things were moving fast. I had planned on proposing in a few months anyway. I told her I had to get back to work, and as she turned to leave, I discreetly signaled the salesperson to hold the ring, promising to return soon. I led her to her car in our building's parking lot, and when she drove away I dashed back to the store. I somehow managed to purchase the ring she desired. When I got back to work late, I ran into her father, who looked at his watch and then at me with raised eyebrows. It's amazing what you can get away with at work when your boss's daughter aids you. It was now or never, so I paused to chat with him. He was leaving for a conference, so I hurriedly asked if I might come over that evening to speak with him and his wife. Suddenly, when I showed him the ring box in my hand, he grinned, nodded and invited me to dinner with the family. I answered his nod, knowing that dinner was always served promptly. At 8:00 p.m. on a Wednesday, the entire family would be present. Sophia would not have known I was coming until she came downstairs for the supper, as was customary. I've always enjoyed dining with her family. Her sisters were a lot of fun, and her parents appeared to really like me, at least I hoped they did. They received me warmly and pampered me as if I were the son they had never had. After losing my parents in a vehicle accident a few years ago, it felt great to be surrounded by a loving family again. Sophia was the eldest of 3 sisters and undoubtedly the most attractive. Emily was the next person in line, and while she was attractive in her own right, she appeared somewhat plain next to Sophia. Emily was also a little more robust, with long mousy brown hair and brown eyes. Despite this, her outgoing personality and affectionate disposition were instantly apparent. The youngest sister, who was significantly younger, was most likely an unexpected addition to the family, but she showed signs of developing into a beauty with Sophia in the future. I genuinely liked Emily and soon realized how much effort she had to put in to be accepted. Emily, unlike Sophia, was studying at university and hoped to one day work for her father's company, a sharp contrast to Sophia. If she had a boyfriend I never knew about or saw him. Emily was always present, overflowing with questions about the things she was studying at school, especially when Sophia took her sweet time coming downstairs. We got along extremely well and we often had a great time together. There were times when I wondered if I was better suited to Emily, but it was far too late to consider such possibilities. I loved Grace, even if it meant letting her have her way with me. Sophia was taken surprised when she saw me by the dinner table, but everyone soon took their seats. Her father announced that he had invited me, which added to my pleasant surprise. Dinner was delightful. The wine was particularly special, coming from his private cellar. After we finished eating, I turned to her father. It was clear that he had informed Sophia's mother about the cause for my visit. She had stayed mute. While securely clutching her husband's hand with a smile, I humbly sought for his approval to marry Sophia. The three sisters shouted with delight and her parents cried tears of ecstasy. Her father graciously granted me permission. I then turned to Sophia, took out the ring box from my pocket and proposed. The room exploded with excitement. After dinner, the women huddled together to discuss the ideal wedding date, eventually opting on a 6-month wait. I assumed they wanted enough time to meticulously organize everything, and during that time I obtained another substantial promotion. The wedding was planned with military precision deserving of any generous adoration. The ceremony was flawless and the reception was appropriate for royalty. No cost was spared and the lunch was delicious. Sophia insisted on honeymooning in Hawaii, where we would spend our first night as a married couple. So after cutting the cake and changing into our travel clothes, we were whisked away in a limousine to the airport for our first-class flight. It cost me a fortune, but it was completely worth it. As we boarded the plane, I spotted one of the caterers sitting further back. He noticed us and waved. I waved back grudgingly because I didn't like him. When we first met, I thought he was sleazy. Sophia thought he was cute, but I felt he looked predatory. Midway through the journey, I began to feel nauseous and by the time we landed I had filled several sick bags. Having never had air sickness before, I wondered if I had gotten or eaten anything that had been infected with a severe vomiting virus at work. Just before we left, and I concluded that was the case. By the time we checked into the Hilton and arrived at our honeymoon suite, I realized I was in big danger. Sophia was clearly distressed, knowing her ideal wedding plans were wrecked. The last thing I recalled was attempting to shower to feel better and then waking up in a hospital room with Sophia asleep in a chair next to me. She awoke abruptly when I vomited into a bag just as the doctor entered the private room. As he proceeded around to inspect me, I spotted my carry-on bag in the wardrobe. Sophia must have carried it with her clothes and toiletries. The doctor confirmed my assumptions. I got a terrible case of the vomiting virus. Perhaps Sophia said something to him. I suggested Sophia take a taxi back to our hotel to shower, change and eat before heading back to the hospital. Despite tears in her eyes, she accepted and left, vowing to return in a few hours. The doctor stated I should have felt better by then, but I didn't. The agony in my stomach was worsening and I was just vomiting bile. My stomach muscles hurt so terribly that each bout of vomiting was excruciatingly painful, bringing me to tears. Prior to meeting Sophia, I had a similar virus, but this seemed different, more like the time I got food sickness from contaminated chicken at a neighborhood deli. I questioned the doctor whether it could be food poisoning from the chicken at our wedding, but he told me Sophia had already called her parents and friends and no one else had symptoms, so it seemed improbable. He then reminded me that he was the doctor and suggested that I stick to my specialty of computers. Sophia must have spoken a lot since my collapse. Sophia did not return that night. She called after a late meal to say she was fatigued and would see me the following day. I attempted to sleep, but the constant vomiting kept me awake. I noted the doctor's anxiety as he requested blood tests and examined my vomit contents. Just as the results came in, I had almost persuaded him that it may be food poisoning. Despite his best efforts and different treatments, nothing appeared to work and I could see him becoming increasingly desperate. He was honest with me, telling me that my situation was getting worse by the day. Sophia returned in the afternoon stating that the time zone variations had thrown off her body clock. Despite her obvious worry, I could sense her growing disinterest. As dusk neared, she kissed me on the cheek and indicated that she needed to return to the hotel for dinner reservations. So I said goodnight. as another attack of vomiting began. Bile flowed as my situation worsened. I was unable to sleep that night. Desperate, I persuaded a nurse the following morning to bring me some baking soda. She didn't hesitate to accept once. I gave her a $50 bill and promised to deliver it after her lunch break. The doctor looked even more concerned, suggesting that if I didn't improve quickly, my body might begin to shut down. ADHD for Sophia's company, but she hadn't returned since the previous evening. When she finally came, she appeared aloof, her thoughts elsewhere. Her visit was brief and she departed without even a kiss farewell. I overheard her asking the doctor how much longer I'd be in the hospital, shaking her head when he said at least another week or more. My bed was near a window and I hoped to get a glimpse of Sophia as she took a cab back to the hotel. I strained to see her as she walked down the walkway toward the taxi rank. Then she waved, but something wasn't right. She wasn't waving or looking in my direction. Instead, she was waving at a man standing at the taxis who was waving back. My heart ADHD with jealously, as I recognized him as the shady caterer. The pain increased when I saw them embrace before getting into a cab together. The emotional torment was worse than anything I'd experienced previously. I must have been crying or had tears in my eyes when the nurse returned with the baking soda. She stared at me blankly and added that she had seen them together on her walk home from the shops. She looked at me sympathetically and remarked, "She's not worth the pain. If she genuinely cared about you, she would be here rather than rushing around with lover boy. You need to acquire evidence, while they still believe you're trapped here." She reached into her pocket, pulled out a card and gave it to me. "This is a card from my brother. He is a good private investigator and his office is right across the street. I will have him here immediately away. He isn't currently busy. Allow him to discover what's actually going on and then you may decide your next step. Who knows, perhaps they are long-lost cousins who are unable to track her down." Considering I could hardly raise my arms, let alone stand, I only thanked her and smiled weakly as she called her brother from the phone near my bed. When she hung up, I requested if she could bring me 3 cups of boiling water, a teaspoon and some extra bags to puke in. Even though she looked at me as if I had lost my mind, she agreed. When she returned with the supplies, I dissolved a teaspoon of baking soda in each cup while waited for the water to cool sufficiently to drink. I explained years ago while doing university study, I heard about a great Australian doctor who was a prisoner in World War II, changed a prison and used baking soda to save fellow detainees from food sickness. It's worth a try. Drinking the first cup was difficult, since I knew it would result in violent vomiting, but the penalties of not attempting were far worse. As expected, the first cup popped immediately back up. The second cup similarly spent a brief time in my stomach before returning with gusto. The nurse waited expectantly as the third cup was swallowed, but no vomiting occurred. She inquired, puzzled, what happened. "Why have you not vomited?" I responded with hope. "No more vomiting, and perhaps I'll be out of here soon. This needs to function. Nothing else has helped. It worked in the Japanese prisoner of war camp and I hope it still does now." She nodded carefully. "Your doctor will not be back for 2 days, so we'll see how you go. If your loving wife calls instead of visiting, I'll inform her that you are in a poor state and completely bedridden. Perhaps the guilt will help her see the light." I had hardly finished speaking when the nurse's brother entered my room. We exchanged handshakes. His grip is solid and soothing. Just thereafter Sophia called to say she was going to explore tourist attractions and wouldn't be returning as planned. She said she'd be too tired after dinner. After she said that, the remainder of her remarks faded into a torrent of useless talk. As she described her plans, I told the private investigator what I feared would happen. We reviewed different tactics for confirming or disproving my suspicions. When I told him that the hotel room was reserved in my name, he appeared enthusiastic. We determined that he should immediately install hidden cameras throughout our suite while Sophia was sightseeing. Fortunately, I still had my hotel suite card in my wallet, which gave him simple access. An hour or so later he called to let me know the cameras were installed, efficient and knowledgeable. He'd finished the assignment fast. He then remained at the hotel, discreetly filming Sophia from a concealed location when she returned shortly after he called to say they had gone to separate rooms to change for dinner. I'm worried about Sophia being near that slime. I frequently attempted to phone her, but she did not answer. Finally her phone was turned off. Desperate. I tried to get out of bed, but was too weak and collapsed. I felt a needle jab in my arm and all will to save Sophia faded as I fell into a deep drunken sleep. When I woke the next morning, all I could think of was how I couldn't protect her. Perhaps I should have paid someone to make sure that man never approached her in the first place, struggling to get up and save what was left of my marriage, but I found myself chained to the bed. My unsuccessful attempts prompted the nurses to sedate me once more. I regained consciousness to see my friendly nurse on duty. She removed my restraints and cleaned me up. I asked if Sophia had visited, but she checked the visitor's log and found no record of her. She did say that Sophia had called around lunchtime each of the previous 2 days. The doctor finally arrived, shocked to see that I hadn't vomited again. The nurse explained that I had taken baking soda, which was an unusual medicine to him. He asked several questions to which I could not find an answer, except for one essential aspect. I hadn't vomited, since he insisted that I stay a few days longer to regain my strength, warning if I attempted to leave too soon, I would be confined. Owing to my current infirmity. I can see in my nurse that I was still compelled to save my bride, but her eyes conveyed a sad truth. Even before she spoke. When she told me that her brother had unequivocal proof of Sophia's infidelity, my world fell apart. Her lover had moved into our room and their affair had been ongoing. It was too late. She hugged me while I cried on her shoulder. My marriage ended in heartache before it had ever begun. Despite this, the nurse left a note on my file at reception indicating that my condition had not changed and that I remained sedated. I gradually regained strength, surviving on modest portions of steaming rice and dry toast. The final lab tests revealed that the chicken I ate had been tainted with a rare man-made strain of botulism produced years ago for germ warfare purposes in my home state. My doctor informed me that the police and other relevant agencies in my home state had been notified and were awaiting my return to conduct additional investigations. As I gradually acquired strength, I vowed to get my life back in order. Sophia had ceased visiting and was no longer calling after finding that I'd be released in time for our flight home. Despite my attempts to call her and leave messages at the hotel desk, I received no answer. I missed her terribly, and the nurses, being knowing of my position, offered me incredible care and understanding, my friendly nurse's close co-worker. Another nurse paid me a visit one day. She explained that her father was a divorce lawyer in my hometown, so she called him while she was with me. She said that I was a close friend who had been poisoned at my wedding, with the offender essentially kidnapping. My bride Sophia seemed to no longer care about me and I wanted to divorce. I interrupted her to say that we had signed a prenuptial agreement that stated that if infidelity was proven, the unfaithful party would leave with only their personal things, a tough yet protective measure imposed by her father to defend family interests. Sophia agreed to the terms. However, I did not have a copy with me. I promised to send one as soon as I got back home. I could almost feel a smile on the other end of the line. My private investigator came to give me his regular briefing and informed me that he had forwarded copies of the taped material to my attorney. I noticed his dismay and asked if there was an issue. His response made me pause, "Since you're still in the hospital. I forwarded everything to your lawyer and urged him to pay special attention to some of it. When I indicated that I was coming to see you, he urged me to let you know that he was ready and waiting. I checked the recordings before mailing them in. It's something I dread because it frequently determines the destiny of marriages. Honestly, I regret not paying careful attention the first night he drugged her. Do you know that I can't believe I overlooked it at the time? If I'd noticed, I would have intervened by the way she was flirting. I assumed they'd already slept together. This was reinforced when I saw him contact his brother and brag about how nicely their plan worked in the recording. He boasted that the drug they used on your chicken was effective and they planned to receive more from their relative at the lab. They believe the physicians are ignorant and they plan to use it on another couple shortly. This time it's for his brother's benefit. Sophia got vulnerable after he drank her during what he said was a dinner. He even gloated about taking her virginity. I'm truly sorry he drugged her only once. Here's a different DVD, including his admission to poisoning. You can give it to the police, or I can send it for you. My sister contacted the police. We already have the medical and laboratory results. They are waiting for your statement and this recorded confession to arresting and charging him and his brother. If they discover the relative referenced in the call, he will also be arrested unless the feds catch him before I alerted your lawyer of the poisoning. He's ready to sue the catering company over the contaminated fruit, not that it will help your marriage. He's also prepared the divorce papers for you to sign when you return home. If you are considering forgiving her, you should know that they intend to continue seeing each other. She told him she would not abandon you because she still loves you. Furthermore, he is married and his wife's family controls the catering firm. He'll probably dump Sophia once he loses interest. Your wife hoped to become pregnant during your honeymoon to fulfill a stipulation in her grandmother's will. That would provide her money. Things become worse. They discuss the potential of her already being pregnant while you raise his child. I know I'm trying to help, but each update seems to cause more grief. Believe me, I would not say this if I questioned any of its stomach-wrenching. On top of that is wearing your clothes. Sophia advised it to help his image. All I could do was shake my head, knowing I would never wear such clothing again, just like I would never touch Sophia again. After regaining some strength faster than expected, I thanked everyone for their help and dismissed myself from the hospital. I booked the first available return trip and got a taxi to the airport. There was no one to greet me when I arrived. No one was expecting me, especially without my lovely bride. Without Sophia and her family, I felt completely alone. I had already relocated my possessions into the mansion that Sophia's parents had given us as a wedding gift. I went there on my way home, if I can call it that. I called my lawyer and asked him to come over in the morning so I could sign all of the appropriate paperwork. It had been a long, arduous day, and despite believing I wouldn't be able to sleep, I soon dozed off while watching TV. The next thing I knew, I was being forcibly dragged to the floor. I was kicked and pummeled as I curled up to protect myself. They shackled me, read me my rights, and informed me that I was being charged with multiple offenses. I could not believe it. I had not done anything wrong. I was just sleeping in my home. They accused me of breaking and entering, trespassing, and mentioning other theft counts. Once they discovered what I supposedly stole. Every time I tried to talk, I was kicked hard and told to shut up. Then I heard a police officer question someone if they recognized me or had seen me previously. I could not see her, but I recognized her voice as she commanded. They hurled the book at me. Simultaneously, I heard another familiar voice at the door inviting me in. I was kicked again, and then two police officers violently dragged me to my feet. Emily gasped, followed by my lawyer's furious wrath as he chastised the officers. He is the owner. You cursed morons. He yelled. I will have all of your badge numbers. You all in terrible trouble. Why did you handcuff and abuse him? Emily started crying and ran toward me. The police let me free and I dropped to the ground, still in agony from the countless kicks. There was dead quiet when I heard my lawyer on the phone wanting to speak with the police. Commissioner mutters and curses filled the room, as my handcuffs were released much more gently than when they were applied. When they tried to take me up again, I yelled in pain and felt my ribs throb. Emily was hysterically screaming for them not to hurt me, as I begged everyone to leave me alone. She leaned over me crying and insisted that Sophia was desperately searching for me in Hawaii. She informed me that she had called Sophia to let her know I had been found. I felt extremely faint, most likely from the kick to my head, but I managed to grab Emily's arm and begged her not to tell anyone I was back. I told her to watch the DVD in front of the television and contact my lawyer for any clarification before I could finish. Everything went black again. Half conscious, I heard the beeping of medical equipment all around me. I prayed it was all a bad nightmare and I still had my honeymoon to look forward to. Was Sophia holding my hand with such gentleness? Were they her tears? My hand felt like it was held against her cheek. I slowly opened my eyes, straining to acclimate to the glaring fluorescent lighting above. I could immediately feel bandages on my chest from being booted repeatedly. As my senses returned, I heard someone whisper next to me. "I'm so sorry, Brian, please forgive me for what I did. This should not have happened, Brian, my God, what have I done?" I began to recall the hardest 2 weeks of my life, wondering if my darling wife had finally discovered me and was now pleading for forgiveness. Wait, something seemed wrong. The perfume was different and the voice was considerably more soft. This was not great face. My eyes finally focused, and before I could grasp, Emily leaped up and shrieked. "He's awake. He's awake." I noticed Emily standing near me, still clutching my wet hand. Her cheek flushed from brushing against my hand. I glanced across the room and noticed my lawyer. I knew him from images. His daughter showed me in the hospital, as well as seeing him at my house. A heavy sigh escaped me, as I remembered the horrible pain I had woken up to, though I had no idea how long ago I heard a frantic scramble and felt hands on me, followed by a chilly stethoscope. Someone pried open my eyelids and shone a bright light into them. The cardiac monitor beeped continuously beside me, confirming that I was alive, albeit very barely. I resolved not to sigh again. If this is the result, everyone slowly backed away from me. I closed my eyes and searched the room, which appeared to be nearly full. However, I only recognized 2 people. Emily was still crying when she presented my lawyer. He took over the introductions for the others. My treating doctor and a nurse were assigned to my room 247th until I healed. The state was bearing the costs. The police, commissioner and district attorney then entered the room, as suggested by my lawyer. They told me that due to a recent poisoning attempt, they would station 2 policemen outside my door. Until I recovered. The scenario seemed chaotic. A brief silence ensued, interrupted only by Emily's weeping and the continuous beeping of the heart monitor, a glimmer of hope among the chaos breaking the silence. The police commissioner comes forward to apologize on behalf of the department for the actions of a few overzealous policemen. He also expressed his difficulty in comprehending the news of his son's involvement. The district attorney's attendance was clearly intended to avoid assault charges against his men, as he emphasized their hurry to finalize the paperwork for the arrest of 2 brothers and their cousin. They required my signed statement. My lawyer read a prepared statement that we had discussed when I was still in Hawaii. I promptly signed it, allowing the DEA to go. The doctor was summoned away and the 2 officers followed him outside to station themselves at the doorway. Once things were settled, I signed all of the forms required by my lawyer. He found my copy of our prenuptial agreement on the floor near to where I had slept the night before I'd been reading it. I made some suggestions to my lawyer, who nodded with a knowing smile. The police commissioner aired his judgment by apologizing for his son, one of the officers that had attacked me. He was clearly worried about their careers if I went public with the unprovoked assault. We closed the door for privacy and offered some suggestions to the frightened parent. None were egregious, but he agreed to investigate them. Given his political and legal connections, I requested a fast divorce with maximum ramifications for the 2 brothers. If these demands were not met, my private investigator in Hawaii offered his assistance. Emily stayed by my side for the first day and night, unwilling to leave, even after I recommended she go home and change. Sophia called many times, sadly, stating that she still hadn't found me and that my luggage was still in our room. Emily revealed through sobs that she had phoned the police to visit the residence every morning to verify everything was secure. She had came across the mess. I had left the kitchen with a few beer bottles scattered on the floor. When she saw my arm hung over the edge of the sofa and didn't recognize me, she panicked and called the cops, causing them to overreact. I forgave her without hesitation and she pressed my hand to her cheek seeking comfort. Emily put her phone on speaker while speaking with Sophia and I overheard a strange male voice in the background suspecting anything. I muted the phone and requested Emily to look into the man in Sophia's room. Sophia's call unexpectedly terminated, but she quickly called again, claiming that the signal had dropped. This time, background noise was noticeably absent. The next morning, my lawyer reappeared, obviously energized by the case's complexity. He told me that state officials had agreed in principle to approve the divorce during the first court session that day. We were encouraged by the evidence we had, including the prenuptial agreement and the alleged attempted murder. Albeit the latter accusation may have been significantly overblown. It was critical to prosecuting the brothers the fact that our marriage had never been consummated, combined with her ongoing infidelity while I was near death in the hospital had been weighed. She had even stated her intention to continue cheating and have children with her new boyfriend. My lawyer then went to court to guarantee that the state kept its pledge. He returned well before lunchtime with my final divorce decree in hand. He advised Emily take her father to the hospital without first revealing the purpose oration. Given his notorious history of explosive outbursts, Emily consented and left to collect her father. Aware of the battle ahead, she texted me as she walked out of his office, followed by him. When they arrived, we had closed the blinds to darken the room. The police stationed at the entrance appeared to worry him and he was already on edge. The cops, who had been briefed beforehand, permitted them to enter without incident, as their eyes adjusted to the dim lights. I saw surprise on his face. My lawyer, seeing an impending explosion, promptly intervened, asking him to sit and listen before acting. My lawyer had proven to be very capable and I couldn't help but wonder about his prices. I hadn't inquired and he'd never mentioned them. I was surprised when Emily sat beside me on the bed clutching my hand while her father took his seat. He gave both of us a nasty glare. The lawyer then began to stretch the truth significantly, albeit with a basis in fact, which I suppose is sometimes essential in his job. He quickly notified my father-in-law, now technically my father-in-law, that I was under police protection because the authorities were concerned for my safety. His expression of horror was evident after I had been purposely poisoned at my own wedding. He went on to say that while I was near death in the hospital, my loving wife had stopped making visits and could not be reached by phone. Instead, she was having an affair with the same man who had poisoned me. Our marriage had never been completed and she was about to say she was pregnant to ensure her grandmother's substantial wealth. Emily's father sat there shaking his head in surprise. Then Emily spoke out, revealing that she had seen the DVD evidence of Sophia's betrayal and learned of their long-term strategy to deceive me in a despondent tone. He finally continued, "But Sophia called every night telling us how worried she was about you and that you were terribly sick from a virus. She said she was on your side the entire time. Just the other day she called in a panic, stating you had vanished from the hospital and no one could locate you. We were going to travel out to aid her, but she requested we meet her here because she had a buddy there. She was convinced you'd arrive before it was time to leave. She speculated that you might have been delirious. Sophia is flying home tomorrow on her return ticket and she hopes you will be with her." My lawyer said you must understand that Sophia was not a part of the conspiracy to poison Brian and is in fact a victim in this case. However, she committed adultery and continued her infidelity on a daily basis, ignoring Brian's near-death status. Both Brian and the hospital attempted to contact Sophia in the days coming up to his release, but she never returned their calls. Brian flew home without knowing where she was. As a result, the state has developed special laws to facilitate their divorce based on their prenuptial agreement. They are no longer married. Here is some photographic proof, along with date and time stamps, demonstrating that her behavior was not an isolated incident. I recommend that you refrain from looking at them. My ex-father-in-law looked at me with a terrible sadness that I will never forget. Then, turning his head in the same way Sophia used to, he looked at Emily while holding my hand. "Are you both?" he began, but his voice trailed off. "No," we both replied in unison. Emily met me at home when I arrived from Hawaii. I mentioned that she has stood by me through some extremely terrible moments in the last 3 days, while I have been hospitalized without her. I'm not sure what would have happened to me. She's been the guardian angel Sophia was meant to be. He turned to Emily and spoke. "Emily, I have a huge favor to ask. Honey, can you stay close to Brian and look after him for us? Our family owes him so much for what your sister has accomplished. I'm not sure I'll ever come to terms with her complete disrespect, respect and deception. I will need to speak with your mother and prepare her so she does not collapse when she learns what has transpired and what Sophia will face when she returns home. I interjected. Please let Sophia stay with you at your home. Because of her relationship with the caterer, she is prohibited from approaching me under court order while I was unwell. Remember, she was drugged at first and then taken advantage of. I'm so sorry. However, due to her acts and obvious infidelity, I will never be able to stay married to her. If it had only been that one occasion when that dirtbag drugged her, I might have been able to forgive him, but in the last few weeks she has entirely damaged my trust in her. I will never forget how much I adored her. As they continued to discuss the situation, a nurse came in and administered something into my fore, and I must have fallen asleep. I awoke in the morning. The others had left, of course, but Emily remained with me sleeping soundly in a great old armchair that someone had found for her. We had plenty of time until Sophia's plane came, so I let Emily sleep. I got a feeling she had been awake late at night, keeping an eye on me and ready to aid at any time. I twitched or moved slightly. The police commissioner arranged for us to be present when the rascal was arrested, as well as when Sophia was served with her papers. The commissioner's chauffeur drove us to the main entrance, where we were welcomed by the head of airport security, his relative, with Emily assisting me little. We came in and were ushered to the mezzanine floor to await the procedures. Oddly, despite my numerous visits over the years, I had never noticed the mezzanine before. The mezzanine level melded easily into the building's design and acted as a security measure added after 911th. While the glass appeared to mirror the general population below, it was actually one-way mirrored glass mounted on sliding tracks. This established a lounge for covert monitoring, guaranteeing that the public was monitored without their knowing. While we waited, we were given a quick tour of the surroundings. However, by the end, I was fatigued and needed to be pushed in a wheelchair. Clearly, I was not as recovered as I had hoped, and I was certain that the beating from the cops had not helped my condition. From our vantage point, we saw Sophia's parents enter the terminal and wait quietly in the arrivals lounge. Emily walked down to greet them and spent a few moments explaining that Sophia would be served with divorce papers as soon as she entered the lounge. She also let them know that I was observing from above in a wheelchair when Sophia's mother put her palm to her mouth. I wasn't sure what portion of the conversation had triggered her reaction, but I suspected it was my wheelchair, as she was likely previously aware of the divorce papers. The moment arrived and Emily rejoined me. We watched Sophia and her beau emerge from the plane tunnel. Their faces relaxed before entering public view. They hugged, kissed, and said a short goodbye. Seconds thereafter, police officers converged on him. He foolishly attempted to resist, which resulted in him being tasered, handcuffed, and taken away. While kicking and shouting that he had done nothing wrong, Sophia gazed on with terror. A lot less confident, Sophia made her way to the arrivals lounge to retrieve her luggage. My private investigator in Hawaii had already told me that she had left my suitcase at the hotel reception. By this time, I expected nothing less. After 2 weeks of spending time with her partner, she even let him take any clothes wanted, even my favorite shirt. As she entered the room, she noticed her mother waving and approached them. Just before reaching her parents, a well-dressed woman walked in front of her. I switched on my little receiver to listen in on the chat. We overheard the woman ask if she was Sophia Nelson. Sophia nodded and acknowledged her inquisitive tone, indicating she had no idea what was going to happen. Sophia's mother and father were completely aware of what was happening. They held each other for support. It was a horrific experience for any close-knit family. Even in this day and age, the surfer endured. Sophia Nelson, you have been served with the final decree of divorce, which confirms the breakdown of your marriage due to adultery. The state has granted Brian Nelson's divorce request and, in accordance with your signed prenup, has awarded him all joint property and bank accounts, with the exception of 1,000, your clothing and your automobile. The court's ruling is final and irrevocable. Despite everything Sophia had done, this day marked the end of my marriage. Tears welled up in my eyes as she opened the envelope, apparently unsure of the gravity of what she had just been informed. I bit my bottom lip and Emily grabbed my hand as I rose up to open the window in front of us. The action drew her father's attention and both her parents glanced up at us. As I went away, tears streaming down my cheeks, I heard Sophia cry out in pain. Finally understanding the reality of the issue, she glanced to her parents for encouragement but saw that they were focused on us. She followed their attention and noticed Emily and I standing together. Then she collapsed. Sophia was swiftly responded to by terminal workers who took her on a stretcher to a neighboring room to heal. Emily is still concerned for her sister's well-being. I wanted to make sure she was all okay. We wheeled me to Sophia's resting place and found her parents by her side, crying and pleading with them, claiming she didn't deserve what was occurring. Emily entered the room coldly welcoming Sophia home and promising to catch up later, just as she was about to depart. Emily came back to Sophia and stated, "Your lover poisoned Brian. He nearly died. While you betrayed him every day." She kissed her parents on the cheeks and exited the room alongside me. As Emily pushed my wheelchair through the door, I noticed Sophia watching us and then we heard her plead, "Brian, please come back. I did not know. Please. I still adore you, Brian, please." Her father restrained her to keep her from running after us. Emily remained by my bedside, only leaving for brief minutes. I stayed in the hospital for another week till I was released. Before I left, I learned that the brothers and their cousin had not been given bail at their hearing. The man who had been with Sophia received divorce papers while awaiting trial. My lawyer had met with his wife and given her enough material to start her own divorce proceedings. Their insurance company chose to settle swiftly rather than face a possible bigger award ordered by a court. Back at my residence, Emily looked after me as I gradually regained my weight and health over the next few months. It became clear that my first beliefs before marriage were true. Emily and I were far more compatible. Unlike her sister, Emily had no demands and was pleased to sit with me and watch a movie or look at the stars together. Sophia had always insisted on going out to posh restaurants or nightclubs while looking after me. Emily returned to university, but remained with me every night. She no longer required to go home for new clothes because everything was now stored in my guest room. She also continued to attend the weekly Wednesday night dinners at home, despite being provided as much sick leave as was required. I returned to work as soon as I gained medical clearance. When I entered the office, there was a profound silence. The situation immediately normalized, but no one knew what to say to me. They were aware of the situation through office gossip and my brief marriage became a taboo subject, I believe due to fear of employment implications. Before lunch I received a phone call summoning me to a meeting with my ex-father-in-law. I was still treated like family, but I hadn't been asked back to their house, most likely because Sophia lived there. I almost expected to be fired, figuring they no longer wanted me. Surprisingly, rather than the termination I expected, I was invited to dinner. It was Wednesday after all. I reminded him that Sophia's restraining order was still in effect and he informed me that she had been admitted to a private clinic for treatment of depression induced by her acts and the subsequent life changes. She had even experienced a miscarriage and lost her kid. Dinner that night began fairly tense, with Emily seated next to me instead of Sophia's name was glaringly omitted from the talk, despite frequent glances from their mother. Finally she spoke up, "Brian, what are your plans now? We know you don't see anybody else and we only see Emily on Wednesday nights. You two have seemed quite close, since well you know when we just want to apologize for everything that happened and express how much we like having you as members of our family. We'd really like you to stay a part of our family, even if we're a little ahead of ourselves." I could tell she was anxious and attempting to collect her thoughts. Then she said, "I had my heart set on having grandchildren soon and we thought you and Emily might have developed an interest in each other." She then flushed deep red. I turned to Emily, took her hand in mine and smiled. "I believe your mother wants me to get you pregnant. Should we start practice tonight?" My humorous tone made it plain that I was joking. I hoped they knew. Emily replied, "Brian, you know I promised my parents I would be a virgin on my wedding night. So if you want to have children with me, we will have to marry first." I was expecting some light-hearted banter from Emily, but her genuine response threw me off guard. The entire table went silent waiting for my response. In contrast to my well-planned proposal to Grace, my mind raced at 1,000,000 miles per hour. My friendship with Emily had developed spontaneously while she took care of me. Throughout those many hours together we had become best friends, sharing our hopes, aspirations and even our loves and dislikes. Despite our proximity, we had managed to prevent ourselves from crossing the line multiple times. Simply being with her, holding her and listening to her breath was plenty. Suddenly I realized that we were more than simply great friends. We were quite compatible. At that exact moment I realized how much I had grown to love her. It did not feel like a rebound. It felt deeper than the love I had for her sister, though it felt like an eternity. Only about a minute had passed and before I could gather my thoughts, I turned to her. Parents licked my dry lips and, possibly shaking a little, finally said, "Well, if you both want me to stay in the family and have grandchildren, I suppose you'd support me in asking Emily to marry me." Her mother burst into tears, adding, "Please, we would appreciate that very much." I didn't have a ring with me at the time, so I turned to Emily and asked her to marry me without hesitation. We kissed as soon as she agreed. Her mother then explained that the same inheritance laws apply to you as they did to your sister. Let's go figure out a date with that. The three women departed the table. When her father saw my bewildered expression, he stood up. He was most likely trying to escape the inevitable questions. I stood up and followed him out to the balcony. I had heard about this bequest before and wondered what it had to do with wine. Sophia betrayed me with such ease. I knew she wanted to become pregnant. During our honeymoon, we used to make jokes about it. While we are discussing difficult questions, sometimes I wondered if she chose me as her husband for that reason. Is there any truth to this? He remained mute, so I proceeded. I know she said she loved me, but I'm left wondering if I was merely a means to an end, someone to inseminate her on our honeymoon. She liked me. When we first met while I was in the hospital, she made a recording expressing she hoped she was pregnant by her partner. I hope Emily isn't seduced by the same inheritance that hangs over her. I said. The room went silent for a moment before she responded. My mother was quite wealthy in her own right, and when she died, she bequeathed her estate to her three granddaughters. Assuming they meet certain conditions. First, they must be virgins when they married and they must be checked on the wedding day. Second, they must give birth within 9 months of their honeymoon. Third, they should name the infant after my mother or father. If any of them fail to achieve these standards, the inheritance is reduced from 10 million to 1 million. So when we observed Sophia's actions, we wondered about her intentions, just like you are right now. Sophia will not be impoverished. She will win 1 million once she meets the third criterion. But it's hard not to wonder if she aimed for the 10 million and maneuvered the circumstances to her advantage. We are really sorry for what happened. We did not see this side of her when you married. We believed Sophia's feelings for you were genuine. Emily differs from her sibling. I'm sure you've observed that the two of you share a strong bond. It almost seems like it's waiting to be formalized in marriage. We have seen Emily while she is with you. She's constantly observing you, her gaze never leaving you. There is more to my mother's will. We are not permitted to discuss anything more at this time. Naturally, a prenuptial agreement will be required again. I trust you understand. His answer explained certain points but left me with many more questions. I was going to ask for further information when his cell phone rang and he said he needed to accept the call. He stepped away just then. The women returned, looking bright, perhaps a little like Mary. After the champagne, Emily came over to me and helped me close. We locked lips for a few moments, leading her mother to joke. Goodness, have you already gotten a room? I had an idea. I leaned forward and whispered to Emily. You overheard your mother. I believe she wants us to begin working on those grandchildren immediately. Should we go to your room? For the night, I began to guide her away internally, struggling with the need to test her truthfulness. I wondered if she wanted me for who I was or for the prospective inheritance. It felt like a game of chicken watching who would turn away from the racing cars first. Emily did not resist or respond. You already know. I promised my folks that I'd wait until my wedding night. I believe Dad has told you about the inheritance and its terms, but you need to know that more than anything else, I hope to spend the rest of my life with you. We are taking a significant risk, but if that's what you really want, I want it too. Let's go. She turned to her parents and wished them good night. Determined to follow me, no matter what the cost, we entered the house and her mother's eyes opened in surprise. She seemed to be about to say something, but nothing came out. As we walked through the threshold, I paused and turned to Emily, kissing her tenderly. Victoria, I spoke quietly. You promised your parents, and that is very significant to them. You were willing to give up your inheritance for me, but that is unfair to you, so we'll wait until the wedding night. Please don't make it too far away. You're extremely desirable, but I will wait. We kissed again and held each other tight. 3 months later we got married. Emily signed our prenuptial agreement expressing her faith in our future together, which made me think about Sophia's genuine feelings for me even more. Grace came to the wedding with her new partner and wished us well. She had benefited considerably from therapy and appeared to be truly pleased. They were planned their wedding for the next year and seemed like a perfect match. We managed to wait until our wedding night, and about 9 months later Eleanor Marjorie Nelson arrived a little early. We had just brought Eleanor home when her grandma came to help out, and she immediately inquired about our plans for a second grandchild. My parents would have adored Eleanor, and I frequently wished my mother could have held her and witnessed her development. I knew they would have been close. When I watched Eleanor, I could see my mother smiling and felt as if she was experiencing those lovely moments with her granddaughter. A few weeks later, at one of our regular Wednesday night family meetings, we were shocked to find the family lawyer present after dinner. He handed Emily account information worth $10 million, just when we thought things were resolved. As part of the inheritance, I was granted 10 of her family company's shares and promoted to vice president, which stunned us. Reflecting on everything, I felt confident that this time I had married the correct sister. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.